This is a CBC podcast.
Hello, I'm Rebecca Zanbergen. This is The Current podcast. Farmers have always been vulnerable to the whims of the changing seasons. But with climate change and consecutive years of drought, floods, and cold winters, the extreme weather is taking a heavy toll on their crops. It's hit stone fruit farmers in the Okanagan region of BC hard this year. Jennifer Deol is the co-owner of There and Back Again Farms in Kelowna, BC, and she is also on the board of Farmers for Climate Solutions. Hello, Jennifer.
Good morning.
Jennifer, tell me what your crop is looking like this year. What are you seeing?
Yeah, so we have a total crop loss, which is 100%, not a single flower, bud, fruit of peaches, apricot, very little plums. For cherries, we have maybe 5% of our crop. It's very, very low. This is the lowest we've had for our table grapes, which are eating grapes. So a lot of the soft fruit has been impacted or completely wiped out, which is something we haven't seen to this degree in the Okanagan since I've been farming.
Oh, Jennifer, I'm sorry to hear that. What led to that? What sort of conditions were you dealing with?
So honestly, a lot of Okanagan tree fruit has been contending with extreme weather for the past 3 years. Our peach trees, for instance, have still been recovering from the 2022 heat dome, where they had a huge crop loss, about 90%, and we had a lot of weekend trees. And now you have a winter that's quite warm, unseasonably warm. So all the fruit trees are still a little bit active, and you have bud activity. And what we saw happen in the Okanagan was in January, a sudden cold snap. So temperatures plummeted below negative 25 degrees Celsius. That sudden whiplash from warm to all of a sudden cold completely killed any buds that were active on soft fruit. And so when spring came, we noticed that there wasn't a single flower on any of the soft fruit because of that damage.
What was that like, discovering what had happened?
Yeah, it's honestly really gut-wrenching because we were really banking on having a good season. Me and my husband are young farmers. Our runway for sustainability in the industry is wearing thin because it's been 3 years of a really low crop. So to all of a sudden have nothing, it just made our stomachs drop. 60% of our income is the soft fruit, primarily peaches. So now we're going into a season knowing we still have to tend the trees, we still have to farm, but we're going to be operating in the negative, which is not a really good feeling. And it makes you wonder for how long can we continue to do this? Yeah.
Can you survive a year like this? You say it's 3 years where it hasn't been looking good.
Yeah, so we might have to pivot. Me and my husband, we knew that going into farming, we're operating in a world where the climate crisis is the new normal. And so we diversified quite early on in our production. We knew that we were going to have years where the fruit was just not going to be in production because of a cold snap or drought or whatever the severe weather event will be. So we do ground crop. So what we might do is we might just focus more on growing vegetables because with vegetables, you have more flexibility. You can find vegetables that you can farm in a warmer season, or just try to find tree fruit that's a little bit more adaptable to extremes on both ends of the weather.
I want to bring in another farmer to this discussion now to talk about the changes we're seeing. Allison Squires farms with her family near Wood Mountain, Saskatchewan. So that's near the border with the United States. She's also president of Canadian Organic Growers. Good morning, Allison.
Oh, hi. Thank you so much for having me.
So, Allison, tell me a little bit about the changes you're seeing on your farm these last few years.
Actually, I don't think I have a much more positive story to tell than Jennifer just did. In our region, we're in an area called the Palliser Triangle, which is normally hotter and drier than a lot of the prairies. But what we've seen on our farm is actually we're entering our 8th consecutive year of severe or extreme drought. The drought started in 2017, where we got less than an inch of rain during the growing season total, and we suffered a crop loss that year as well. And it hasn't really improved since then. We're now averaging around 3 inches of rain, give or take, every year since then, which is very difficult to grow a crop under these conditions. But it's becoming the new normal for us, unfortunately.
Was there a time, have you been a farmer when things were better?
Yeah, well, I can still remember those days. My husband and I started our farm together in 2010, and those first 6 growing seasons were really good. We had what was considered normal precipitation for this area, which is around 15 inches during the growing season, and we did really good. We had some good crops, and thank goodness we did, because we had a bit of a buffer going into the drought, income-wise, so we had a nest egg to fall back on to get us through those first 3 years of drought. And we're very thankful for that, but it also calls us to remember those good days and know that it's possible to grow good crops in this region. So we're looking forward to hopefully getting back to those days sometime soon.
Mm-hmm. And what is it you're growing?
So we're a mixed farm here. So our farm is Upland Organics, and we grow certified organic small grains primarily. So those are things like legumes like chickpeas and lentils. We also grow oilseeds like flax and mustard, and we grow a whole bunch of cereals like durum and wheat, and a bunch of heritage grains as well, which is something we're pretty passionate about. And being a mixed farm, we also run a herd of cattle alongside the cropping enterprise. It's a way to diversify our income, but we also do it as a way to build soil health. So we're running the cattle across the cropland to help nutrify the soil and increase the biological activity of the soil, which is another way that we're able to buffer these changes in climate as well.
And so what has been your yield these last few years, given those first 6 years?
It's been very subpar. So like I said, in the first year, we had a total crop loss. And then it's been maybe 60 to 70% of our normal yield since then. Some years, again, and 2021 was that was a more widespread drought across the entire prairie region. And we suffered then as well. And then these last couple of years, actually, what's really been hitting us hard is because it's been so hot and dry for so long, we've seen a real boom in the grasshopper population in our area. So not only are we contending less precipitation, but now we're contending this huge infestation of these grasshoppers, which eat everything. I didn't know very much about grasshoppers before I started farming, but now I know a heck of a lot about them, and they eat everything in their path. So what we're seeing now is most of our crop losses are due to the grasshopper population spike in our area.
Oh, wow. And is there anything, if you know they're coming, can you deal with them beforehand, or are they just a lost cause?
There's ways to deal with them chemically, but of course we're organic, so we don't use any kind of synthetic chemicals or pesticides on our land. So we use other more innovative ways to deal with grasshoppers. So we do things like we choose crop types and varieties that are maybe more resistant to grasshoppers. So for example, grasshoppers really love lentils. I don't know why, but they really do. And this is folklore that we've heard from previous generations of farmers in this area. So what we've done is we shifted our crop rotation to include other legumes that grasshoppers are not as fond of, like chickpeas, for example. Grasshoppers don't like to eat chickpeas, so we plant way more of those. And then we also do things like planting 2 or more crops together in a field. This is called intercropping. It's something that's emerging as being more common, but still kind of fringe on agriculture in the prairies. But if we see 2 or more crops together, that kind of mitigates our risk a little bit. So if the grasshoppers eat one crop type, they might not eat the other in the same field, and we can still harvest the field.
Wow, lots to contend with there. Jennifer, I want to go back to you for a minute. You talked a little bit about diversifying the kinds of crops that you grow in an attempt to mitigate some of the problems that you're seeing. But I mean, looking forward, do you think you've done enough, or are you going to try different things now? I mean, like, what else can you do if things continue in this direction?
Right. So I think one of the things that we're contending with, and a lot of farmers in our region, is when you do think of the Okanagan in BC, you do think of soft fruit, peaches, and that's going to become something that's going to become more precarious and difficult to grow. So what we're thinking of doing is just growing things in the region that we would have a little bit more control over because they're more ground crop and seasonal crops. So shifting towards growing strawberries, melons, vegetables as a way to sort of make farming sustainable for us in the region. It is something to contend with. And we have looked into if there are peach varieties that are more hardy to the cold, but because there isn't as much research in cherries as other soft fruit, it is just something that farmers are having to contend with, is just ripping out their trees. So one of the things that we're unfortunately having to think about is we can no longer sustain having this 4 acres of peaches not produce food, and what can we grow here instead? It's a very sad question to ask because I personally connect to peaches. It was my entire childhood. My parents farmed, and I don't remember a season we didn't have peaches. So for me, it's been very difficult, but it is something we have to address, is what can we grow here that we have more control over and that can be more adaptable to a changing climate.
Yeah, interesting that you grew up with this. So the expectation of what you were going to see, you say you sort of had your eyes open that climate change was real, but did you expect that it was going to be this bad?
No. So, I mean, oftentimes people have even said to me, the Okanagan gets cold. So, of course, food there should be adaptable to that. But it's the extremes we're seeing, the whiplash from like unseasonably warm to all of a sudden negative temperatures. No crop can really sustain that kind of winter. And I grew up farming everything with my parents, and I've had conversations with them and other farmers, and this is not how farming was. You might have had one year where you had a low crop, but to see a couple years in a row of nothing is really unheard of, and of course not sustainable for us.
BC Premier David Eby has promised an extra, I understand, $70 million for farmers to replant, to strengthen fruit orchards and vineyards. Will that make a difference? Will it help?
Yeah, so I think that it will make an immediate difference for farmers who do wine grapes or cherry. There's a lot of funding and research into cherry and wine grapes in the region, but that funding will not do anything for folks who are doing soft fruit. I mean, the issues we saw in January was unseasonably warm to all of a sudden negative 25. No tree fruit variety can sustain that kind of sudden shift. So it is a Band-Aid solution. I think what we need investments in is more robust and ambitious solutions to address the climate crisis, and also really understanding how do we implement solutions that create a sustainable agriculture sector, working with farmers to reduce our emissions, improve our soil health, reduce our water usage. Like, we need more holistic approaches, not just Band-Aid solutions, to help farmers replant and keep replanting when the variety can no longer sustain the intense weather anymore.
Allison, you also talked about focusing on the health of the earth, of the land that you're working. What other solutions do you find there might be for you to make your operation viable?
Yeah, I think we're also interested in seeing a bit of change in terms of what the focus is for research and innovation in agriculture. On our farm, we do focus a lot on soil health, and we do several things on our farm that are a little bit outside the box of normal agriculture. We do things like composting on scale, because we're talking on our farm, we're a little bit bigger, so we're talking, 7,000 or 8,000 acres of cropping land, which is a little bit harder to manage for these types of changes. And so we're looking for innovative solutions that could be done at scale. And so we're testing those out on our farm. And a lot of the funding and the research that's currently being done isn't at that type of scale, and it isn't looking at things that are chemical-based or input-based necessarily. So we're looking at ways on our farm that we can increase the health of the plant, because doing that means that it's more resilient to things like grasshopper pressure. They're better able to survive and thrive in drier climates if they're healthier going into it. So I think that's kind of the focus that we're seeing on our farm, and we're seeing some success with that focus as well. Like I said, we do a lot of research on our farm, and we've done a lot of measuring of soil. So we've been farming for about a decade now, and I have a decade's worth of soil data on our farm. And what I've been able to show is that using all of the different techniques that we do, the cattle, the composting, the diverse crop rotations, the cover cropping, doing all these things has actually allowed us to increase our soil organic matter by 1%, which is huge. 1% organic matter means that I'm able to better absorb whatever rain does fall. It means I'm better able to increase the biological activity of my soil, allowing my plants to thrive and be healthier. So we're seeing on the farm results with some of the techniques that we're doing, but unfortunately it's not widespread yet.
I'm curious, Jennifer, we don't have much time left, but when did you stop? I think a lot of farmers, you hear about praying that the rain's coming or crossing your fingers or hoping for a better year next year. When did you stop sort of crossing your fingers that things would get better and start working on this proactively?
Yeah, so I think after that 2021 heat dome, we literally watched our crop burn in front of us in the ground. So since then, me and my husband have been we've been working with like local agencies and other farmers to adapt, to figure out what crops can grow here. How can we take more approaches ourselves to better the health of our soil, put in irrigation and watering systems that can reduce our water use and just grow things that we know we have a little bit more control of despite the weather. So this was, back in 2021, we knew we had to start pivoting.
Before we go, I just want to ask both of you, Allison, do you ever regret making the choice to be a farmer?
Absolutely not. It sounds crazy, but no, it's something that we love doing here and we're excited about it. I don't want to leave your listeners with absence of hope. I'm still really hopeful that there's a future for ag, and I'm still really hopeful for the next generation coming through. There's lots of really, really passionate, innovative people entering the space right now, and I think the future is bright.
Jennifer, what about you?
Yeah, I echo Allison. I mean, my spirit has definitely been dampened. It's been a really tough year knowing that we're going into a season where we can't make money, and how are we going to sustain this? So the pressure is really hard. And some days it feels like, why are we doing this? But we also feel that we need to have hope and we need to have action. And if anything, farmers are resilient. They've always been resilient and will continue to be resilient in these times.